and hello. We start with the bells. This is Mark Delacroix coming to you for this week's, basically for my stream this week on Lorelink. Let's go ahead and switch to the planning view. Um, and basically, speaking of planning, you can see what our schedule for this week is. Yesterday, Mike ran an excellent stream talking about Pathfinder and Quest for the Frozen Flame. Today, I'm talking about Blades in the Dark. And then on Friday of this week, note the time, it is slightly different than usual. We'll be coming at you during the daylight hours to actually run the Blades in the Dark game. And you'll see how these people actually react to all of the stuff that you'll see planned today and last week. Let's go ahead and switch off the schedule. Boop. I'm switching off the schedule, but want to know the easiest way for you to find out when things are happening on the Twitch channel and to be informed if something happens. Yes, that's right. That's click the follow button because we are in fact. I don't know why this shrank. We are in fact we're running a push this month for affiliate. And we are attempting to get up to our total of 50 followers, which are necessary for basically for Senpai Twitch to notice us, as it were, and grant us the ability to grant you cool stuff like emotes and things like that, as well as other things like being able to have subscribers and things like that. But mostly we're doing it to raise awareness about Lorelink, and so that we can get attention basically to Lorelink, discuss, basically reach more people, discuss with more people, show off not only what we're doing with Lorelink, but also being able to reach a wider audience for building a community for basically playing games and tabletop games and things like that, and discussing things on the GM side as well. Just basically in terms of being a source for another source for people talking about games and running games, and so that basically perhaps will change a player to a GM and relieve a forever GM somewhere out there, so that they're not so basically other people will try out playing, basically running games, and see if they can stop being scary, because that's the whole point of Lorelink, is to create a system that makes running games just a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, a little bit less scary for the average player, so that when basically so when they basically when they show up for their first game and they're not having to deal with books and web browser tabs and things like that. They have all their notes gathered in one place, and they know they can quickly link between them, look at stuff, and be able to run a game with minimal insanity, basically minimal stress. Because that's probably the hardest thing. The thing that prevents a lot of people from making that step from being a player to being a GM is, I've got a lot of stress in life already, and I don't want to add to it by basically showing up for a game and being unprepared and having my players basically throw all sorts of weird situations at me and things like that. And I'm going to keep basically weird situations and then not being able to adjust to it in time or be able to react or add notes and do things like that. And basically end up in my players won't have a good time. If my players don't have a good time, then I don't have a good time, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the idea with Lorelink, is that let's make a relatively straightforward, accessible system so that anybody who's at the table can run the game, create notes, create custom, create custom worlds, create cool events, characters, and things like that, and track all of that and take some of that stress off of them. So what we're talking about here today is a game that we'll be running on. I'm going to make this slightly bigger because it bothers me that those were on two lines because I had resized it. one of those accessibility things. We have the ability to change and react to sizes being changed, so that basically if you're looking up on your phone, you get a nice aspect ratio, as opposed to if you're looking at it on basically your laptop or on your computer or something like that. A lot of sites I've seen out there have troubles dealing with that. They especially have troubles if you do something as horrible as, say, you have vision problems and you need a slightly bigger font size. Like, this is actually zoomed in slightly. This is up to 175%. Um, and a lot of websites don't handle that well. Like, if you zoom in on the website, it just becomes absolutely useless. And so that's one of the things when we talk about accessibility that we want to make sure we keep track of. There are lots of standards for that. And we want to make sure that we keep up to date with those. All right. So where are we, Whiskey? Where are we? Where are we? Whiskey, where are we planning? So Lorelink lets you zoom. Um, use the capital Z there. That makes me think, basically, could you use this during a Zoom call? The answer is yes. Yes, Lorelink lets you use this during a Zoom call. That's fine. Lets you actually zoom in and things like that is. Yes, in this guy I have zoom speed racer. Yeah, basically it is zoomed in because basically I was watching Mike's stream the other time, basically, and I realized that it's much easier to read on stream if I zoom this in a little bit more, so the text is slightly bigger, so that it's basically so it's a little bit more readable for people out there in their audience. You're not just squinting at me, typing stuff into text boxes and things like that, which are a little bit smaller. Let's make things a little bit easier. Um, all that said, I did forget to fix the chat box, so that's a little weird. So you have to forgive me. Basically, we'll call it a research trip. Sure. One of the things I was out of town for part of this weekend in New York, having a great time visiting theaters and things like that, which actually links into this campaign. So basically visiting Gotham. Basically, I grew up. Basically, if I look out that window, I see a large field and other things. If I look at that window, I see basically a street and a yard and things like that. And so basically not the great urban environment basically that gets you in mind when you're planning a campaign like this. Sometimes it's good like that, basically taking trips and things like that, gathering information. Whether it's basically visiting the place in actual person, if you're so lucky to have a downtown you could visit for an urban campaign, or visiting a forest, state park, or something like that, if you're planning a more outdoorish campaign. But there's also great resources on the internet, like Google Street View. Um, it can get you that feeling of, oh, that's what it's like when you're down on the street. Uh, basically in an urban city, things like that, looking around, realizing, oh, okay, basically there's buildings every 5 feet is a building. There are tons of people on the sidewalk. Traffic is everywhere. Google Side View even has they especially have nice things for hiking trails and things like that. Yeah, basically using Google Maps for things like for modern urban games is especially great when you pick a city that you may not be based in and may not have the 100% most familiarity with. Google Maps and Google Earth, Google Earth is great for that. They do have hiking trails, I believe, on Google Street View. I think it's got a different name technically if you're using it for that, but so you could actually visit state parks and forests and things like that and get a look for what is it actually like if you're in a rainforest type wood, if you're in a Seattle area, a more swamp forest, which is technically Indiana, or Floridian swamps if you want to go to a more actual swamp-like area, or maybe a more darker primeval forest. There's some great uh, German trails and state parks and things like that. You can get that feeling of what it's actually like being in a forest. Um, so, in any case, basically, I'm not going to try to talk too much about outside things here, but I had that experience over the weekend, and I was thinking a little bit about it in terms of this is actually it's a great basically the ideas for campaigns. And that's one of those things where that's one of the scarier things is you get that blank page syndrome of I'm starting a campaign. Yeah, the Black Forest is darker and primeval. Um, you get that like, oh no, what am I going to do? What am I going to create? How am I going to get ideas for that? Um, and it's basically GMing is great from that standpoint, is that there is just so much to draw inspiration from, uh, whether it be basically books you are reading, books you have read, video games you have played, basically going around looking at world maps, things like that. Writing prompts basically are also a great way of basically starting a campaign idea as well. And there are tons of sites that give you those. I know that there's Reddit sites. I'm sure there's Tumblr threads for them. Um, I'm sure there's I'm sure they've moved off of Twitter and are now on Blue Sky as well. Subscribe to one of those and look at those, glance at those, get those ideas, and basically maybe you can toss them into a game you have. If maybe it's just an event in one of your games or something like that. But it's great to get those little bits of inspiration. You don't have to come up with everything 100% original by yourself, because guess basically 90% of the time the idea that you come up with is unlikely to be 100%, basically is unlikely to be completely original. Either you were inspired by something that actually happened or something like that, you just didn't realize it, or you and somebody else got the same inspiration, that there's other people out there who have similar ideas. But the thing is, when you put it into your campaign and you mix it with your players and your other ideas that you have, that you other things that you put together, then it becomes unique. Then it becomes yours. And your players aren't going to be like, oh, you just pulled this from that or this or that. Basically, I guarantee you, your players are more interested in just exploring whatever it is, and they're going to throw their own twists and turn in there. That by the time that it's done, it's going to be unrecognizable, as it were. Uh, it will be a completely new creation, and it's great. That's the point. That's the fun part about GMing. All my ideas are completely original, honest. Yes. Basically, to be fair, I could not, basically, Wolf Mom, I have gamed with you, and I could not recall any time that I've sat down at one of your games and been like, no, this is just retelling this story or this story. And basically been like, they're just pulling from this or that. We've always been enough chaos in your games to blur any stolen, quote unquote, ideas you've had. And they've always been fun. So, back to this campaign. So, talking about sources of ideas and things like that. So, over the weekend, I was reading. I had the book on my thing, and now I moved it. Now I don't know where it went. Oh, that's a shame. Oh, there it is. I was reading one of my favorite author series, Stephen Brust. If you're running a Blades in the Dark type game, I would recommend reading some of these books by Stephen Brust. They are a series of novels called Vlad Taltos. They are set in his own unique world, but they are very definitely Blades in the Dark adjacent. So much so that if I remember correctly, they may have they likely inspired Blades in the Dark, and they were rewarded during the Kickstarter, and it exists now, a campaign setting that is just set in his universe. So basically, it's a great series for getting ideas of how to run a criminal underworld game set in a urban medieval Renaissance level fantasy, that weird place that you have is that fantasy books exist in, that especially D&D and things like that, where it's more Renaissance fantasy than medieval fantasy. Everyone carries swords. There's a few guns running around, but it's fantasy because of the fact that not everyone is dying from plague all the time. Not everybody is overburdened by by a feudal monarchy system, etc., etc. People can afford to travel from point A to point B. You can become an adventurer. So I was reading through those books, and so you'll see little bits of that sink in. Basically, one of the things I'm like, okay, I want to I want to base the basically I'm basically Lloyd Och. I can't remember how to spell that character's name. It's somewhere in here. I'm actually just going to pull in the name directly from the book because it's nice to be. It's nice to basically to pay homage to the pay homage to characters where you got them from, especially when you're fairly certain your players won't basically aren't going to pick up the reference. And now I'm taking way too much time to find a name in this book. There he is. It's an extra O. Cool. This game will pick someone from this universe, basically from this town. So that makes you a that. Acaros. Actually, let's move that into the actual description. The short description is going to be make up the crime bus of the neighborhood. Okay, with that, I'll probably could pull an image from somewhere. Actually, what images do I have? Basically, the next thing we have with basically we have a built-in library of images and things like that. So if you built one game, you basically might find yourself being like, okay, do I have other? I have people. What do I have in people? Oh, here we go. Basically, I pulled in a bunch of people. Most of these images come from basically from free either free picture sites or things like that, basically, which are great resources for just pulling together things where you're like, okay, this looks like an interesting person. Let me build a character around them. That one actually might work. Now I've tried to make sure that these aren't AI generated, but the biggest problem with AI generation is that people just aren't willing to admit they've used AI generation. Like if you're going to do it, just be honest with it and just upload those. Let's go with that one. Doesn't have the scar, but we'll deal with that later. Okay. The radio basically screaming dead air, dead air. Yeah. Basically, I was aware of that while I was talking. I'm like, that's part of the reason why I've got music running. So at least there's something going on while I'm typing and talking. But I do apologize for the little bit of dead air as I was musing and thinking. There's going to be a little bit more of that as I go through here and I type. You can't hear the music. Huh. Well, that's the problem. I could have sworn that this was set up. I'm hearing it just fine. I don't know about you guys. Did I turn it down too far? Oh, apparently I turned it down too far. Interesting. Just keep all the music for yourself. Apparently I had it turned down just far enough that it was audible to me still, but not audible. You're a GM, not a bard. Eh, inspiration. Everybody gets an inspiration. Um, Here I'm like, oh, okay, I've got music going. Basically, it started off really well. Basically, it was a great, like, had some great bells ringing. It faded in. Um, it just apparently was just low enough that desktop audio wasn't picking it up, but my headphones were loud enough that I could hear it. Cool. You know what? I'm not talking to anybody, so I could just turn it down on my end, um, so that I can still concentrate and think. Um, for those who are curious, we're using music from Pretzel Rocks. And if you're ever curious about a song that you hear in the background, I believe exclamation point song, our wonderful mod 20 has set up, should give you there we go. Gives you the name of the song, and it, basically gives you the name of the song and what's playing. Though right now it doesn't seem to be accurate. That's interesting. We'll deal with that later. Basically on my end, it's telling me this is Chastely by Drummer Boy. In any case, so talking about basically things like this in a game like this, basically getting ideas for places and things like that. But so basically, we're talking about building out this Blades in the Dark game, and so for a game like this, especially for a one shot, we're going to basically there's going to be a couple of different steps that I want to introduce and get through here. So let's go ahead and plan out what's kind of like this is going to be a more event based thing. So I'm going to start off with we'll call this background. We'll call that setting the scene. And basically, I'm just going to use quick create here to just quickly create some events. And basically, I'm not going to go into detail on them yet because I want to start building out the framework and then build them to get basically and then build on them from there and then basically start filling in gaps and things like that from there. So we talked a little bit about this last time. The idea that I had for this game is the fact that there's a mask in a old abandoned theater that the players are going to be asked to be retrieved. So that's quite basically. I can already basically let's already go ahead. Did I already create that item? Yes, I've got the mask already created. Good. So I've got the item and I've got the person who wants it. Basically in my character thing. And then now I'm going to basically build up. So background is going to be the first thing because in a one shot, this is slightly more important than a one shot. I'm going to want something, and it's more important in a one shot, and it's more important in a game that I'm streaming. I'm making the assumption that people who are coming into this aren't necessarily going to know what this is. So I'm going to want something in there that's going to be a quick reference for me as the GM to remind me of what I've set up in the situation so that I can remember key points to give to the players so that they at least get basically start the immersion. So we'll go with basically we'll do with that. And then the first actual event of the game is going to be let's see what's the best way to describe this. We'll call this contact. And this is establishing the score. And so what this event is going to be is we're going to use that event to set up uh, how the players meet, basically how the players meet the contact, and basically what information they can get from the contact and what the contact is going to want from them. And then this event is planning. So basically now I'm gonna want an event. Basically, I'm gonna want some scenes where I'm going to keep track of information on what the player, basically I'm going to want a place that I'm going to want to save the information the players give me, because especially in Blades in the Dark, a lot of the planning doesn't happen during, basically there's a little bit of planning that happens during this planning stage, and then more planning gets added later as they go on. But it's going to happen relatively quickly, because the point, Blades in the Dark doesn't want you to spend a lot of time lingering on the planning stage, because they know how players work and how much you can get in your own head, and it gets kind of boring, and it's not great for full table involvement, because a planning scene basically can work out great if everybody at the table is really into it and interested in setting up planning and setting up plans and scheming, and basically being like, oh, I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then we'll do that, and then someone else comes in. But if you have a couple of dominant players, especially if those dominant players are playing mastermind type characters or established leader type characters versus shyer players who are playing characters who are less involved in playing, or basically deliberately playing characters who are more likely to be like, what's a plan? Basically, the only plan I have is I'm going to punch the first person I see, and they're like, no, someone else is actually directing them and things like that. And so that doesn't work as well. That can lead to some awkward moments in player dynamics. And so how Blades in the Dark deals with that. Shire characters, yes, your Shire characters, your small hobbit-like ones who are less likely to stand up when the big elves are talking. It works out. It's fine. But the thing is, you have some equalness, but Blades in the Dark wants to be a little bit more basically a little bit more medias res, and so it's basically you get a chance to set up your your planning, and basically there's a lot of planning and things like that goes into like session 0 and building your character and things like that, but that's not the main game. The main game itself is is assumed to take place off screen, and so you're going with a more basically immediate thing, and basically you're dealing with the situation much like a movie. You're going to deal with the interesting bits, and those are the bits that your game is going to focus on. Is, all right, one character is punching a guard or something like that, or one character is attempting to break into basically came in through a window you guys swore would be locked, or basically swore would be open, and you find out that it's actually locked, or that there's an extra guard patrol that night, or basically the gap between the buildings is a little bit bigger than you expected, or basically maybe you couldn't get a boat, and now you're having troubles reaching the island where it takes place. All sorts of things like that, and so you end up with pretty much the players pick a type of plan: assault, deception, stealth, occult, social, or transport, and then they roll what's known as an engagement roll, which basically establishes, is this actually does this actually work out the way? You're taking on your first your first problem. Where's your first obstacle in actually enacting this plan? Is it that locked window, that extra guard patrol, etc., etc.? And your engagement plan basically says, okay, you get some point, basically you get some bonuses and things like that for, all right, basically, did you set up a plan which obviously takes advantage of a weakness that basically that everyone has agreed it basically is a weakness in whatever your target is. Um, you basically your character basically you've been told that this character has a basically this person has a weakness for blondes, and you're like, okay, we're going to go in there with disguise and make disguise one of our character as this breathtaking blonde, and they're going to do the major interacting, and so basically we've established we're hitting a weakness, um, and so all of that is wrapped up. It basically gets wrapped up into that into that engagement role, rather than okay, you get one bonus on one roll when you encounter that part. It's like okay, here we go. And so if you roll badly on that, you run into a problem basically in the before the first obstacle, and then you're having to deal with it. If you roll really well, basically we talk about what the first obstacle was and how easily you overcame it, and now what the situation is. Where are you in the plan? And planning is where I'm going to want to keep track of all of that information, so that when I come back, if we have to come back to this later, I can figure out exactly how this heist went, how this situation went. And I'm using really generic names here because I'm assuming that this is a one shot, so there's just going to be one heist. If I was planning a longer term campaign, I would probably basically name these having to do with each of the heists. I would set up a tag for that heist. Much like Mike was talking about, Mike has in his campaign, he's got book 1, book 2, book 3, because he's pulling a lot of information in, and that's what the tag system is great for. So, basically, if I wanted to do it that way, I'm likely going to set up. Let's see. We're going to set that up. And now when I'm working on those, when I'm creating those, I'm just going to add that tag in so that, let me go ahead and add it to all these. Okay, then I'm going to go to tags. And it's going to show me all the events I associated with it, just like that. And now when I'm looking up just basically things for that event, I can find them there. If we're way past that event and I don't think those events are going to have any effect on the current thing, I can set those up as archived, and they all disappear. But I didn't delete them; they're just archived. So that if I say show archived, they show up. And then I can select all of them. Actually, I can't. Archived, you have to turn off individually. Archive, you can't mass unarchive currently. I have to come in here, do that, save it, go back out. Note that archive does also show up here at top, so you can easily identify stuff which is archived. If you come across it, you're like, oh wait, no, this is something that is basically something I archived I don't want to have to deal with anymore. So let me go ahead and turn that off. All right, so basically, so in any case, basically, so that is how we want to, basically, we're setting this up. It's how I can group these together. Basically, if I was doing a more elaborate, longer term campaign, because I know people are going to be like, oh, basically, I'm wanting to, basically, I'm going to have, what are you going to do if I have a 5-year campaign? I'm running a bunch of stuff in here. Either you're going to break it out into different smaller campaigns if you're really like, I want to keep everything organized by a heist, and so each heist is going to be its own campaign. Or you're going to you're going to use the tag system and things like that to basically call things out. You could also use the the filter function up here. So if I named each of these, if I actually added it to the name, I can go back to here, and we have a filter system right up there. And I could do mask, and it would just list the things that have mask in their name. again, just another way of separating those out and building those, basically making them easier to pull out. So all that said, so basically mascot contact, background contact, planning. Now this is where it gets a little bit trickier when you're planning a game. Basically, one of the problems of planning a game like Blades in the Dark is that basically you've built up all this information here, and now you're going to have a bunch of information which is going to be a little bit dependent on what the players do. Like all those different basically just plan types that I listed: assault, deception. What's the exact list? Assault, deception, stealth, occult, social, and transport. Your players pick that. That's up to your players. Obviously, as a GM, you can put your finger on the scale a little bit. If you don't want them doing an assault, you can stress to them just how many guards there are and how quick their response time is, and living like going in there, basically guns blazing, as it were, is unlikely to end well. And you can kind of try to push them away from that, but you can't entirely dissuade them of that. Maybe they're going to be like, nope, I think we can do it. I think basically if we can lure parts of them away, we can take out the rest. I think we can pull it off. You're like, okay. So as a GM, you have two different ways of handling that. Either you can build out all the information you need in other things, like filling out locations and things like that. Like the Curtain is the name of the theater, so if I wanted to basically include information about different obstacles that they could face, I could put it in there. You know, I need 1 second. I'm going to need to pull something up. It may ding loudly. It's on me. Boop. I've got to pull my notes up that I had in that I saved while I was out thinking about these things. I recorded a bunch of notes, and now I'm going to essentially transfer them into here. So that was my computer, in case you're wondering where that noise came from. Yeah, I know it's always the weirdest thing with stream runs. The streamer suddenly loses the USB connection, and half the people in chat are just like, wait, was that my computer who pinged? Good news, it wasn't that. Okay, good. I'm going to mute slightly as I drink water. Okay. So I have this information. Basically, I've got various problems or obstacles I want them to run into. Like, for example, basically the Blue Coats, which are the police organization in basically in Duskfall, are an ever-present threat. And depending on how loud your players are or what type of approach they take, you may want to have them showing up as different levels of clocks. For those who may not have not experienced Blades in the Dark, clocks are Blades in the Dark's way of allowing the GM to establish tension and consequences, really, for a situation. You put it is literally a circle that you put out there. You divide it into a certain number of slices. Basically, normally the range is between 4 and 8. Higher than that, and it's so far out that it doesn't really. It has to be something super long term and not consequential. Lower than that, and it's almost it's almost too immediate to really need a clock to be useful. But you essentially, all the players can see this clock, and you don't have to, as a GM, identify what the clock is for. But you put it, but it has to be basically the players have to see it to know that their action has had some sort of consequence. Something is ticking up. So, for example, in the case of the Blue Coats arriving, I'm going to use I want to have a clock. Like, for example, in the description of the Curtain, basically under the control of the spirit wardens. And as such, avoid the building under suspicious is not the right word. Superstitious is the right word, and I'm going to misspell that word. Did I spell that right, or is it just being generous? Their abilities. Hail Hydrate. Superstitious. There are 2 T's in there. Okay. And then there's a I. Okay. To at 5 o'clock. Let's see. So basically, I'm going to record that information. I can record that on the location itself. So basically, and that could be even. I would likely put that into the child description, so that basically, if I'm dealing with anything inside the building, I'm going to see. I'm going to say that basically at any rooms I put in there, that okay, now I know basically what the response time is going to be like. So if they're in there, it's not like basically this is a mansion in the high rent district. Basically, maybe the clock is going to be 4. And anything that the players do is going to add ticks to the blue coat clock. Whereas this is going to be like, okay, you have to be doing something unusual to basically to get it. And so what you use clocks for in the game is that it is really basically success in Blades of the Dark. You basically to succeed at a roll, you roll a d6. You roll 1 or more d6s. And 6 is the only unqualified success. 4 and 5 are qualified successes, and 1, 2, or 3s is failure. 1 being the worst, basically a worst kind of failure. 2 and 3 being basically kind of a failure with consequences, as it were. And clocks are generally one of the ways that you deal with consequences, or that players take stress. A lot of times to avoid something bad happening, players will all offer up to take stress and things like that, and that will a lot of times fill those clocks as well. So it's it's a really easy, it's a nice way of dealing with a failure in a situation that is visible to your players, that isn't a mysterious GM scribbling in the background. It's a way of raising tension in the room. The players know. So basically, if you don't identify the clock, it's an unknown threat, but they know something is happening. It also gives them, the clocks don't have to necessarily be a consequence. They might be a goal, basically an extended action, as it were. Where you're like, we need to convince this person to let us through. And you're like, okay, this person is somewhat susceptible to your arguments, but they're not it's going to take a little bit of time to convince them. I don't want to make it just a single roll. I'm going to make it a series of rolls. And what that means is I'm going to put a clock down, and anybody can take actions that they feel will fill that clock. And depending on their success, will indicate whether or not I add more to the clock. Or in the case of doing something bad, like we're here to convince this person, and the cutter, the brute, decides I'm going to intimidate them and flubs the roll horribly, you erase a success from the clock, and now they're going backwards on the scale. But it's a nice way of keeping that in front of the players, so that they aren't basically so they don't feel like they're taking actions in the void and not accomplishing anything. It puts everything out in center, and again, it creates that immediacy. You know something is happening. You have the reason why they're called clocks is because you know that they are ticking down. Basically, they are. There's an ever building presence. So if you know the fact that basically the blue cards are there as a threat, and you know the fact that, oh gosh, okay, basically the GM's starting to fill that up. Basically, we've got to move, we've got to get going, because it adds to that basically the thought your characters are having in the back of their mind, which is, guys, we're making a lot of noise. Any minute now, they're going to be coming. Um, but the another way to do with this is basically we talked about this in another one is maybe I'll want to use events as a way of keeping track of basically way of storing notes on various different types of approaches. So like if I want to put assault approach in here, head on. That's not how you do that. Thank you. There's probably a dash there. There we go. Okay. So maybe I'm like, okay, so they decide basically they're going, what basically they decide to take the assault approach. What notes do I want to make to myself about the assault approach? Do I want to basically, so maybe I want to say a 4-tick clock for reinforcements. Maybe I just want basically maybe I want to say that basically any wreck basically reinforcements are heavily armed. Any wreck approaches are likely to be high risk. Because again, remember basically remember that how basically it's not risk is not the right word. I think it's situation is the way I want to put that. But it is the idea of the fact that basically how roles get built up is that whether or not it's basically what type of effect it is, and what type of what the risk level is. Is it risky? Is it assured? And then what type of effect is it likely to have? Basically, a limited effect, meaning that middle to low effect. And so basically, what I'm establishing with that is the idea of the fact that if you want to fight their reinforcements, the reinforcements are heavily armed. And Blades in the Dark doesn't really do drawn out combat roles. Again, basically, it's much more of a player focused system. So, what it's going to do is it's going to be like, I want you to make one roll, and I want the players to make that roll. And I want basically the player's role is also the NPC's role. So, if you're like, I want to fight this person, basically, you're going to be like, okay, this is a heavily armored, carrying a nasty weapon type of combatant. So it's going to have a limited effect. Basically, even if you succeed, yes, you've got it's like it's a limited effect. You can do some damage to them. It's not completely basically they have other things for you're trying. Basically, it's like, haha, yes, I know this is a high risk of medium basically with low effect, but I'm going to take down this entire building with a sledgehammer. You're like, no matter how good you roll, you can't take down the building with a sledgehammer. There are mitigations beyond that, but it's great, standard, and limited is the types of effect. And so a limited effect is just going to be like, yes, you succeeded, but maybe the best you did was all you could do is slow them down. You're not going to kill the guards, but limited effect means, okay, maybe you can hobble one of them. Maybe you can trip them up. Maybe you can manage to get them into a situation where they're not able to pursue as well. And that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for a managed withdrawal rather than haha, I'm going to stand here and kill all of them and take them all on. No, the best you could do is manage a fighting retreat. Okay. Basically, but that basically, I'm going to put that note in here so that basically, so that I know, basically, so no, I know what to do with the reinforcements when they show up and what type of roles I'm going to be asking them to make. Then basically, I'm going to talk about the spirit. Basically, like, okay, this maybe the spirits of the building are. Basically on both sides. So basically, I'm going to make note. Basically, I'm going to make notes of what are the consequences, what are the obstacles I want to see for an assault type of approach. So basically, maybe we'll do that, and then basically I could also do the same thing for like a stealth type approach. Okay. Let's go ahead and build that out. So let's go ahead and talk about basically what a stealth approach is going to look like. So, basically, let's talk about engagement. Basically, words. Got word. Getting ready to move it. Let's see. Okay, basically, so, basically, okay, so that's a terrible, basically, so, basically, first obstacle. Basically, first obstacles. And so, basically, what are some good first obstacles that I could see them, basically, if they're, basically, for a stealth type approach. Let's talk about, basically, like the building being unstable. Basically, is rusted, shut. Through into basement. So basically setting up some of those first obstacles and things like that for a stealth approach means the fact that I'm like, okay, basically, well, depending on what their engagement role is, I can take a look at this. I can see, okay, what are some ideas that I have, and then I can listen to whatever their plan is, because I can't automatically assume this. It's like, okay, well, if they take the stealth approach, it's only going to be the window break, because what if they're like, okay, we're going to get contacts. We're going to find out there's an alternate back door. We're going to sneak in an old servant's entrance. We're going to use basically we're going to basically go in through a wall. Basically because this is an old building, and there is a food kitchen which is kind of set up inside of it. So what if we say that I have basically what if one of my contacts basically we sneak into the food kitchen, and then we go through a wall in the back wall of the food kitchen and just blow through it that way. And basically, so now window breaking, door lock being rusted shut doesn't help, but maybe I'll go with floor collapsing. Basically, so all of those are good ways that I can have where, okay, that is, I basically get those ideas in place so that I'm ready for whatever the players kind of throw at me with different approaches. And you don't have to go through every approach, because like the transportation approach doesn't really work. It's likely to any trip, because this isn't a smuggling type scheme. They're going for an object that's already in the building. They're not trying to get something past someone else, so it's unlikely that a transportation basically type. I'm going to have to come up with a transportation type of deal with the repercussions now. I'm likely going to reclassify it as a stealth approach, or maybe it's a deception approach. If they're going to be like, okay, we're going to wait, we're going to leak word to the spirit wardens that somebody wants this mask, and then we're going to wait for them to take it out of the building, and then we're going to try to arrange to be the group that uh, basically transports it for them. We're going to disguise ourselves. Okay, now you're pushing more towards a deception approach. Um, so that period is going to bother me. I'm going to get rid of it. Okay. And so now basically maybe what's some good first obstacles for I cannot type up stuff. Oh. Everyone's a great typer until they get on stream. That's not true. I am a terrible. Basically, I am terrible at spelling. Even outside of that, ask anybody who has to proofread any of my newsletters and things like that. Speaking of newsletters, by the way, as a reminder, basically, I've just given up that we will have a newsletter that is coming out. Thank you, Tony. We will have a newsletter coming out basically this Friday. Yes, this Friday, because it comes out the second Friday of the third Friday of the month, and third Friday of the month. Yep. For Tony, our social media person, is gently correcting me as I stumble through this. Basically third Friday of every month, we have a newsletter that comes out that discusses a lot of interesting things for plans, for basically discussing plans. Yes, gently. Basically discussing what we're doing, how we're coming, basically what our upcoming streams are, things like that. It's a good way of getting a good look at what happened in the past month, what we're planning to do in the future. And if you don't want to engage with social media, because social media is a dumpster fire, and would rather have the information just handed to you on a basically on a once a month, possibly more than that, but only in case of really exciting information. And even then, it's only like maybe 2 or 3 times a month. Basically, you can get that information delivered directly to you in the form of the newsletter. And so basically the link that 20 has just posted is a great way of getting to look at that. Basically, you sign up for that newsletter, and then once a month, you'll get that. So, in any case, to continue on in this, basically, you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get the January is a great place to start. I had one more thing. January is a great place to start because we talk about everything that happened in the past year, and we also talk about a lot of the interesting things which are coming in 2024. So if you want to basically get some great information on where we're going and some cool things to look forward to, subscribe to that newsletter. So let's talk about basically back to this. So first obstacles in a deception approach. So an obvious one would be like players are recognized as a fairly obvious one. But let's go a little bit more subtle. What's more to allow the crew in? Crew basically is recognized someone by contact or someone nearby. Mystery battle. Fails at a key moment. And so basically, again, basically it's just kind of like, okay, so they're trying to sneak into a building. What are some of the things that I could have go wrong for them as that first obstacle? Because again, really, this is as far as you really basically really want to plan in detail for basically Blades in the Dark. You're going to want to have some information with characters and obstacles and things like that in the building, but your first obstacles are going to kind of set the scene, and your players are going to kind of run from there. Um, so there are two ways to set up some of this stuff that you're going to want to deal with beyond that, because um, you're going to want to have some notes on hands that basically allow you to pull stuff up quickly on the fly, because Blades in the Dark basically this is kind of the opposite end of what Mike is doing with the pre-made adventure in Pathfinder 2e, where this is a much heavier burden on the GM. And it's much in terms of, oh gosh, I need to come up with X or Y, and basically I can't plan for it in advance beyond maybe having names and other stuff like that. For example, I'm thinking that there's likely to be basically I was in New York. Let's draw some information from Phantom of the Opera. So basically come up with a good we'll call it Rodrigo de Altamas. Revenge-driven spirit. Let's say that Rodrigo attempted to be leading role. The understudy for of the cast through the audience in the process. So basically we can have we can set up this character stuff. We're like, okay, basically they seem to be I'm wanting to run I'm thinking of I'm going to have it's a haunted theater. I'm going to want to have some parts of it, some of the spirits are going to be more likely to help the players, some of them are going to be less likely to help the players. So they end up in a situation where a spirit could make sense. I'm going to set up this spirit, we set up this one. We'll set up another one just called the Diva. Here. Manifestation of the theater's desire to perform. A mix of all the emotions. desires and fears of many actresses on stage on the curtains stage. So basically now I've got basically this, and I've got the diva. That's the highest level personification, but you wanna. Grammarly thinks that's great, Thanks, Grammarly. Yeah, we'll call it good enough. Okay. But so now basically, maybe I want to basically have. Basically, for a clock event, I may want to have. Go with the curtain notices. And basically, if I want to make it really easy for me, basically, I can say basically. For ticks. And basically talk about it here. Basically, if I put that in the short description. Should I say that I can see right away where this event stands. So the fact that I can be like, okay, I can basically, I'm glancing through this, I can take a quick look at it and be like, okay, now this isn't going to work if I have a lot of things in here. Basically building it out this way, I'm going to have to filter it. Basically, maybe I want to make this, call this current notices clock. And so now I could do clock and just pull up things which have clocks, and I could use that as a way of keeping track of what active clocks are in the game, so that if we pause the game or come back later, or if I'm just wanting to keep track of where things are, and I'm doing this more in the theater of a mind or online type situation where I'm not actively drawing them out, this is a great way of doing it. Basically, I can keep track of it here, and then I just have a listing of all the clocks I have active in the game in one place. The other thing you could do with that, basically building out clocks in here, is I can also describe. I can for ticks. When complete. Starts to sing. Basically forced to resist. Let's see here. What's a good resistance for that? That's probably going to be. That's probably going to be basically. Basically on failure. The blue coats block, as well as the worms. So basically I've got that clock going. I'm probably going to want to add another clock here for and that's going to be a long term. Going to say purge. Living beings in the building. And so now basically this is likely like an 8-tick clock is a more of an overarching type clock. It's very definitely a I'm going to use this as a I want to make the clock so I can find it later. Okay. So I got that. So now I have 2 clocks. And that one is, we'll start that at 0 ticks because nothing has happened. But so now I've got these clocks. 4 ticks is basically a more immediate fear. Basically the 8 ticks is definitely more of an overarching thing. It's definitely going to be like if the players decide to take a nap or rest or stop to bandage wounds or things like that, you're likely going to, as the GM, likely going to start basically be like, okay, but I'm going to add a tick to the detonation clock. Basically maybe 2 ticks if it's taking them a while. Even if they're enough sounds good. But basically in terms of basically just ticking through, keeping track of all of those, basically keeping track of that growing tension, making that clock. Basically, that is the type of clock that you clearly label, you clearly put into the center of the table, and you draw. Basically, one of those things that your player's eye is just going to be drawn to. They keep looking back at and seeing, okay, how far are we? How much time do we have? Do we need to get out of here? And so it's a good way of doing all of that. And again, I want to keep track of that. So that I know what happens, and I want basically having this information here lets me know, okay, what happens, things like that. And if I wanted to, I could even add like we talked about it's for excessive planning, things like that. I can add this list and basically keep adding a list of ideas in here for things that would add ticks. So again, if they end up in that situation, basically I'm building these notes out so that I can have all of them basically in place, available, basically if the situation comes up that they run into this sort of things. Sorry. Yeah. 1 second. Need to get a drink. Okay. So, how do we gather all of these things up? I've kind of got a lot of loose different things around here. So basically like the campaign, basically the curtain. Basically let's go ahead and add a quick couple of things in here, like the stage. Dressing rooms. Actually, I'm just going to go into the curtain. It'll make my life a little bit easier. There we go. Curtain. Orchestra pits. And the rigging and box seats. Basically, I'm kind of just throwing locations in here. I'm not really mapping this place out because this is going to be more of a theater of the mind type situation. But I want to put these ideas down so A, I can reference them in other notes and things like that. And B, so that when I have it, they're like, okay, I'm gonna go here or there, or give me an idea of what things look like. I'm going to have these set up so that I can have locations like the stage. maybe I'm going to pull up basically pull throw some images in here and throw some text description on what the stage looks like, so that I have a better clue of how to describe stuff to the players when they decide if they decide to interact with that aspect of it. Let's add a couple more. Stage, the dressing rooms, the box seats, orchestra pit, the rigging, prop storage. Actually, we'll just call it storage. And we'll also call, let's have the scene workshop, or basically scene is not the right word. My brain is just blanking on props, backdrops, props, scenes. Darn it, my brain is completely blanked on the word for all the things that appear in the background of a play or a stage show. I've just I'll do that. We'll just call it that. So basically creating all of those things, and then it's like, okay, where do I want to put basically where do I want to start the basically I can say, okay, like maybe I say that basically items. I had forgotten what the name of the mask is. Whoops. Name of the mask. Divix. Right. Scroll down a little bit. So maybe that's one idea. Decide to put that there. And again, because of the fluid nature of Blades in the Dark, you may or may not basically want to lock down something like this. Like, oh, it's basically the item is very definitely in storage. You may want to have a default location for it, but don't be afraid to, while you're playing the game, change it up to basically in response to however the heist is going, unless it's some piece of information that you want them to have found out in advance. Then obviously don't shift it around after that point. But be willing to, basically, this is a much more fluid reactionary type system, and if you're not willing to, if you come in it with a hard and fast scene, it basically you're going to have clashes and basically friction with what your players' plans are. Because if they're like, oh, we're going to blow in the front door and things like that, we're going to come through there, maybe they're never going to go all the way back to storage or something, like where you decided things are, and you're just forcing the campaign to be a little bit longer because of that. So, like, I would basically, what I would do is I'm going to put together descriptions for all these before Friday. I'm going to build those out, and then I'm going to reference them in, like, the curtain of basically what I said, basically in here, that the diva appears on the main stage. I'm going to change that to be basically, boom, now I've got that location set there. I can't tell if the music is glitching on my end or because that's just weirdly glitching. That's odd. Okay. Hopefully, let's just skip this track. I can't, because it's distracting. It's distracting to me that music is glitching, and I can't tell if it's the song or if it's the saw basically the track. So we're just going to skip to the next track and see if that fixes it. Okay. So basically, that's one way for me to link all of these things together is to basically use the any glitching if you talk about the glitching. Yeah, that works. This is where it being fun. So basically, again, setting up these locations, setting up these events, linking them together like that. You can also basically use triggers to link these things together. So if I want, basically, if I wanted to link the stage as a location for this trigger, I could link it that way. Now I have a link between them. Something else basically is going to be useful for establishing the way things are going to happen regardless of the players is using timelines. Timelines are going to be useful for you to put things in a row in a sequence. And so if I build out a series of events like let's see here. Let's go. Spirit Wars plant explosives. Basically, reduce guards. Let's create some other ones. Maybe it's good if I want like there to be like a team. Let's make that a little bit more compact. There. Okay. And here, Wardens. I could link that to link it to that clock. And now if I want to put all those things onto a timeline, I could pull up the Spirit Words plans. Now I could go in here. And I could just associate the Spirit Words plans. So we're going to plant the explosives. We'll put that at 0. We will say to reduce the guards after that. Put that at 1. They do a final sweep. Put that at 2. They detonate explosives. We'll put that at 3. Okay, boom. Now I've got a basically, okay, this is what the Spirit Words are going to do. And I've got a quick and simple way of looking at. If I want to add something new, I can place it in and be like, okay, maybe I want something else to happen between 2 and 3. I can link those in there. I also don't have to keep this as just being the Spirit Warden plan. I could make this basically the if I wanted to, for example, introduce a rival faction that was breaking in, basically at what point do they show up? Okay, they're going to show basically, so maybe maybe this is too narrow, maybe I need to move this. Not that way. I can just move it, like put it here at 5, and then I want the basically between the basically after the final sweep, I want some other group to basically to break in, and so I could add in a couple of basically create a new event. Let's say some. Let's see, some street urchins break in. Kids in danger. Sure, we'll just call it that. And then it's going to notice that let's go trying to. They could sell. Do that. We can put that at 3, and then maybe. Actually, do I want it at 3? Maybe we're supposed to move that to 5. I didn't save you. There we go. I can identify the hungry part. Yes, you should you should eat. Eating is good. Even with the time delay. I know the fact that it's past lunch. Basically, if I wanted to have something else happen, like we'll just say urchins menaced. Peers. I could have this could just be like, yeah, the recoveries every 1 to 2 hours now. Yeah, you've had some. That's great. You gotta watch out for those sorts of things. You'd be like, hey, buddy, what do you want? Oh, okay. Maybe I should pay attention to that. There's all sorts of fun ways that your body's like, hey, I just want you to know things are cool, but it'd be really great if we ate a little bit more often. Oh, okay. We got mistakes. Kids for herd them to a stage. We can put that on 4. So I've got all I can associate these events on the timeline, and I can keep track of all these things as basically as these things are happening. That way I can keep track of what things are going on, even regardless of the players. And again, basically this is a one shot, and so organizing all these things into a single session is going to make sense. It's going to make my life a lot easier, especially if I take care of basically things like those clocks. Those clocks are going to be super awesome to add here as associated events on the because I'm just going to be able to keep track of all those clocks, right? Basically, I've got all these clocks listed right here. I can filter them, so if I need to add other ones, I can still do that trick of just filtering by clock to just pull them up. But I can keep basically a simple flick here will let me basically know whether that clock is finished. If the clock isn't done, I can transfer that to basically if we decide, okay, basically this is a longer term game. Maybe I'm going to move some of these clocks onto my next session or an existing session or a new session. That way I can keep track of those places and things like that. Building all of that into this situation where the session is going to become a nice, quick, one-stop thing for this heist. So let's go ahead and add the curtain as a location. Let's go ahead and add the mask. And basically we'll add add all of our contacts in here. So I can have all those basically again, basically making the session, basically the end result is the session is essentially your one-stop place for when you come to sit down for a game and you're thinking about what do I need to run a game. You're going to come into a session and basically that is going to give you everything. You're not having basically, so if I am building up a lot of different heists or locations and things like that, I'm going to use the use the session to keep track of all of those, and I might even use the basically I might even use the session to keep track of things as they start to happen. So if they basically if they're in here and they take the assault approach, basically like I'm going to have background and planning, and I'm going to want to include those in here. But I'm also going to want to I'm scrolling down a lot when I could just do it from up here. Basically, depending on which one they pick, maybe I'll wait until they actually make that decision and then add it. Basically, then add in the one they pick. Like, okay, they picked deception. Let's associate that one. Now I've got that in here already set to go, and I don't have to keep flipping. Basically, I can ignore the other ones, and I have it right in here for me to look up. Basically, right away. So I'm not doing a lot of flipping back and forth and searching through stuff every time I flip off. It's like, okay, everything I'm using, either I add it in here beforehand because I know I'm going to need it, or I add it in during play if I planned on it and now I know I need it. Same with locations. I'm like, okay, what locations are they actually visiting? Let's keep track of those. And so if I need to add, like, okay, they went to the stage, they went to the box seats, I can add those in here as they encounter them, basically making a running record of where they've gone, things I need to be aware of. If I make notes on those locations, I now know which locations I need to look through as opposed to looking through all of the locations I've created just in case. And again, if I need to then break all of these out into separate, basically into another session, I can copy only the relevant ones and move them onto the next session. Basically, something else for clocks. If you're wanting clocks to be more associated, basically, if you rather than doing it as event, another way of doing it, we do have custom fields, so you can add, for example, that basically the main stage location we talked about. If I wanted to have the diva clock that we talked about earlier, if I wanted that to be in the stage instead, I could create a custom field, call it basically. Call it the diva appears. Call it the clock. Say it's a number. And now I can track it here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I can tick up and down just like that. And now that's saved right there on that field. And I don't have to track that. And that's great for things like the campaign. Because basically one of the interesting things about Blades of the Darkest, clocks aren't just one session. They can be over multiple sessions, and they could be long-term goals. They could be goals that the crew has, etc., etc. And so adding in those clocks here, like basically maybe the crew has a goal to basically they may have a goal like to basically. And they're wanting to look more into what this guy's background is. Basically, maybe I'm just going to add that clock in here, and it's going to be slowly ticking up, basically session by session and things like that as they get closer to finding out what's going on. And I'm going to want to keep track of that clock separate from everything else. I'm going to put that on the campaign so I have a good easy place to look for it that lets me know what's going on with that campaign. Okay. Wow, we talked about a lot. It's 6:40. it's always great when I come into these things. It's like, what am I actually going to talk about? How's it going to work? What do I plan for? Basically, it's like, as long as I basically, much like the game, getting my notes together, getting that all organized means that I can makes it relatively easy to get through these and plan these out. But this is not the basically this if all of this sounds interesting to you. It's only 2 hours later you've got a whole stream. Yep. Let's go with Twitch schedule. Pop this back up here. Boop. So, again, welcome to January, basically 2024. Hopefully you're surviving the frozen and cold weather out there. But if you're looking for something to do that basically you want basically which will hopefully warm you up from laughing and having a great time and being invested, this Friday, January 19th, from 12 to 7. I will be running this game. Well, basically, we will put theory into practice, as it were. We will see if plans survive contact with the enemies, aka the players, and I have practice. And we will run this game, and you'll be able to see me basically using this game, as well as basically see the players and see their reactions and see how we deal with all of that stuff. And plus, it's a good way, basically, one, it's a great way to see Lorelink and Lorelink in action and what Lorelink is doing. B, basically, I feel like it's a fun way of basically having a basically, even if it's just in the background, it's a great background noise, interesting. Basically, I guarantee you this group will be chaotic and chaos, and they will throw things for twists and things like that. So if you're like, man, my players are basically terribles, you can come and have basically Schadenfreude or watch somebody else and basically realize that no, you're not alone. All players are chaotic. And so you can see how I handle that. Laugh as I succeed or fail, as it were. And finally, again, we're doing all this in January because we are pushing for affiliate. So, hey, if you want to get a reminder of when we go live, hit that follow button right here on this stream, and you will get a reminder when we go live on that Friday. And basically, if we hit 50, basically, if you're one of the last 7 people, I believe we're at 43 last I checked. Basically, you could be the one to push us over. So we're in that range. If you're like, oh, I want to do something important, I'm holding off until the very end so I can help push them over. Now's your chance. You never know. If I'm not on the stream, you're not going to have an update. So smash that like button, follow button, and basically you might be the one to push us over to 50 and receive the fabulous no prize of us just being excited and happy to do that, like we are for all of our followers. All of that to say, basically tune in on Friday, 12 o'clock. You'll see basically all this in action. If you're curious about Blades of the Dark system, want to see what it's like being run, basically follow us there, and you'll see us approaching it. You're going to have basically someone, some newbies to it, so there'll be just some explanations. It's basically in terms of what's going on. So it'll be a very newbie friendly stream. So don't feel like, oh, I won't know what's going on. We'll help you along with that. So, all of that to say, exciting times up ahead. Basically, we got this stream on Friday. Please tune in. Please follow. If you wanted to catch, if you missed the previous stream to this one where we first started off talking about this and talked a little bit more about Blades in the Dark and how that worked, we do have an archive of all of these streams on YouTube. We are currently live streaming over there right now. And basically, that is a quick and easy way for us to archive those streams directly onto that channel. So check those out. Check out those archives if you want to see what's basically some of the things, or want to check out some of our past streams, some of our past actual plays. Check that out. Or if you missed Mike's excellent basically prep on basically Quest for the Frozen Favorite yesterday, check that out there as well. In any case, this is Mark Delacroix, and this is for Lorelink. This is Lorelink. And hopefully we'll see you Friday. So we will catch you all later.